What if life just doesn't feel? And if there is no larger plan, no destination set, no purpose waiting to be revealed at the end of the journey? This question may seem scary, but what if, in fact, it is liberating? Since the beginning of time, humanity has tried to find a definitive answer to the meaning of life. Mythologies, religions, philosophies, all offered different versions of this search. But is there really a certain answer? Or are we all trying to fill the silence with comforting narratives? What makes this question even more disturbing is that it is not only theoretical, it crosses everything. Our decisions, fears, beliefs, and even the way we deal with death. Have you really wondered why you're here? Why do you do what you do? Or why do you feel this emptiness from time to time, even when everything looks right? Today, let's dive into some of the boldest and most transformative ideas already thought about this issue, from existentialism to religion, from ancient philosophy to the crises of the modern world. Let's talk about Sartre, Camus, Nietzsche, Kierkegaard, Viktor Frankl, and especially you. Because maybe the question is no longer, what is the meaning of life? Maybe the real question is, do you have the courage to create yours? Since the human being has developed self-awareness, a question echoes in the depths of the mind. Why are we here? The first civilizations did not leave this doubt unanswered. In ancient Mesopotamia, for example, life was understood through myths, narratives that explained both the creation of the world and the role of the human being within it. The myth of Enuma Elish, for example, shows how the world arose from chaos, with gods fighting with each other, and how man was created to serve the gods. There was already an attempt to make sense of existence. We were made for a purpose. In ancient Egypt, this search refined. The pyramids, the rituals of mummification, the post-death judgments, everything was part of a symbolic structure that stated, life has meaning, and this meaning continues after death. The meaning of life, therefore, was in preparation for beyond. And then, in ancient Greece, the question began to change shape. Get out of myth and enters philosophy. Socrates believed that the meaning of life was to live in an examined way, to question himself, to seek the truth. Plato, his disciple, said that we live between shadows, and that the true meaning of existence is in the world of ideas, in a superior invisible reality. Already Aristotle was more foot to the ground. The meaning of life would be to reach eudaimonia, a full life, with virtue and reason, right here in the real world. Monotheistic religions such as Christianity, Judaism, and Islam also presented their visions. We are here to fulfill God's will, live with righteousness, and achieve eternal life. Life then becomes seen as a test, a passage, a path that only gains meaning in another dimension. What do all these views have in common? The attempt to escape the anguish of not knowing, to shape something that perhaps by nature be fluid, changeable, uncontrollable. But what if, as some modern thinkers sug, the meaning of life is not ready? What if he is not revealed by anyone, neither by gods nor by traditions? What if he has to be created? It was in the 20th century that this view was radicalized. A man named Jean-Paul Sartre had the boldness to break with all the previous ideas and propose something disturbing but also deeply liberating. Existence precedes essence. This phrase became the heart of existentialism. And what does she mean? That the human being is born first, without purpose, without manual, without predefined essence. And only then, living, choosing, acting, he becomes something. That is, we were not created with a meaning given beforehand. We are the ones who need to create that meaning. There is no destination waiting for you. There is no secret plan being revealed slowly. What is freedom, and along with her, responsibility. For Sartre, this freedom is so radical that he calls her condemnation. We are condemned to be free. Because even if we try to hide behind social norms, God, parents, leaders, in the end, the choice is always ours. And this freedom charges a high price: the anguish. Existential anguish appears when we realize that it all depends on us, that every choice we make mold not only who we are, but also the world around us. Sartre said that when we choose an action, we are saying that this way of acting is what we think is ideal, not only for us, but for everyone. This is heavy, but it is also powerful. Because if nothing is written, if there is no divine script, then we are the authors of our own history. And that completely transforms the question, what is the meaning of life? View. What is the meaning you will give to your life? For Sartre, there is no reason to live, but there is a huge power to build one. If Sartre confronts us with radical freedom, Albert Camus throws us straight into the void. For him, life is absurd, and the human being is an eternal foreigner in a world that does not respond. Camus starts from a brutal dilemma. If life has no meaning, why don't we kill ourselves? He writes, there is only a truly serious philosophical problem: suicide. But calm, Camus is not promoting the end, he is exposing the beginning. It is from this direct confrontation with the emptiness that he builds his philosophy of the absurd. The absurd is born of the shock between two forces: our deep desire for meaning and the silence of the universe. We want life to make sense. But life is simply, and that's where Camus makes a genius turn. He says that recognizing the absurd does not lead us to despair, but to freedom. By accepting that the universe is indifferent, we no longer expect an answer from the outside, and we really begin to live. This is why he creates the figure of Sisyphus, the man condemned to push a mountain above every day, just to see it roll back to the ground. For many, this would be a useless punishment, but for Camus, Sisyphus is the symbol of conscious man. He knows the futility of his task, and yet he performs it. He refuses to surrender. He chooses to live. Camus ends his book with an iconic phrase: "You have to imagine happy Sisyphus." The real revolt, says Camus, is not killing himself. It is remaining alive with lucidity. It is not to appeal to comforting illusions, such as ready religions or doctrines. It is facing the absurd and continue. And in this continuing, in this act of challenging silence with a conscious and passionate life, a new kind of meaning is born, a sense built without guarantees, a sense that is born of its own refusal to give up. Camus invites us to a form of silent heroism, living as who knows that there is no redemption, and yet chooses the fire of consciousness. If Camus and Sartre invite us to face the emptiness with courage and lucidity, Søren Kierkegaard proposes another way: the jump. Kierkegaard was the first great existentialist, long before the word existentialism exists. But different from others, he was a deeply religious man, and it is precisely from this tension between anguish and faith that its philosophy is born. For him, anguish is an essential part of the human condition. To live is to be facing infinite possibilities, but every choice we make us abandon others. This generates fear, generates paralysis. He calls it the dizziness of freedom, but what to do in this? Kierkegaard says there are three stages of life: the aesthetic, the ethical, and the religious. In the aesthetic stage, the person lives seeking pleasure, distraction, avoiding suffering at any cost. It is a superficial life marked by the escape. But sooner or later, this life bumps into despair, a deep feeling of empty. The person realizes that even having everything, nothing fills. So it can advance to the ethical stage, where it comes to seek to live responsibly, with values. Here, the individual recognizes that he is responsible for his life and the consequences of his actions. But even this stage has limits, because as ethical as it is, the person still feels that something is missing. And that's where the leap arises: the jump of faith. Kierkegaard believed that the true meaning of life would only be found when human beings surrendered to something larger than himself, and that something is not rational. It is a paradox, a faith that is not explained, that does not prove, that just you live. But beware, for Kierkegaard, this faith is not an escape from thought. On the contrary, it is a courageous confrontation of doubt, a dive into uncertainty. He writes that faith is precisely the contradiction between the infinite passion of the individual and objective uncertainty. Kierkegaard does not say that God gives the meaning of life. He says that the meaning arises when we accept that we do not have control, and yet we choose to trust. It is an answer that does not please everyone, but it is one of the deepest ever given, because she recognizes anguish and doesn't try to erase her. It only offers another way to cross it, with faith. Amid the atrocities of World War II, in the heart of one of the darkest periods of history, a philosophy that stated, even in the face of extreme suffering, it is still possible to find a meaning to live. Viktor Frankl, Austrian psychiatrist and survivor of Nazi concentration camps, including Auschwitz, lived the absurd in his crude form. He saw families being destroyed, people being treated as things, human dignity being trampled. But even there, between hunger, cold, and death, Frankl has not lost sight of a certainty. The human being needs meaning to continue to exist. It was from this experience that he developed logotherapy, a therapeutic approach based on the idea that the main engine of human life is not pleasure, as Freud said, nor power, as Adler said, but meaning. And this meaning doesn't have to be something grand. It can be small, personal, intimate. It may be in a gesture, a memory, a value. Frankl said, "Who has one why, faces any like." This phrase was even inspired by Nietzsche, another thinker who recognized the pain of existence but saw in creating a way of overcoming it. For Frankl, the meaning of life is not something fixed, not equal to everyone. It changes according to the circumstances. Can be found in three main places: in action, in accomplishing something significant, contributing to the world, working for something bigger than yourself; in experience, in loving someone, contemplating a beauty, being thrilled with something deeply human; in attitude, especially in the face of inevitable suffering. Even when we cannot change the situation, we can still choose the way we react to it. The latter is the most powerful, because Frankl does not romanticize suffering, but says that when it is inevitable, our dignity is in the way we choose to face it. In Search of Meaning, he reports that many prisoners who lost hope simply stopped fighting and died, while others who found a sense even in the dark, a child waiting, a cause, a memory, could resist. Frankl reminds us that even when everything is taken us, one thing remains: the freedom to choose our attitude and what happens to us. The meaning of life can then be built even in the rubble, even in pain, and maybe, especially in it. If there is anything that unites all these thinkers, Sartre, Camus, Kierkegaard, Frankl, is the idea that life does not come with an instruction manual. There is no sense ready waiting for us. Life is a blank sheet, and it is up to each one to write their story. But this freedom is not an easy gift to carry. Jean-Paul Sartre called it the condemnation of freedom. Because while we are free to choose, we are also responsible for everything we choose. And that includes the consequences, the failures, the regrets. There is no way to blame fate, society, God, or the parents. To be free is to lose the right to point out the finger. This is what makes freedom so heavy. Because every choice we make, even the little ones, even now, builds what we are. When you say yes to something, you are saying no to all the other possibilities that existed at that time. To live, then, is to renounce. It's betting. It is to commit to. And that is why anguish accompanies the human being. Because each choice carries a risk. Because we have no guarantee that we are doing the right one, and yet we have to choose. Life requires courage. Not the courage not to be afraid, but to act despite fear, to continue walking even in uncertainty, to live without guarantees. It is at this point that existentialism proves more current than ever. In an era where everything is distraction, where society sells ready models of success, happiness, and meaning, making responsibility for life itself is an act of rebellion. It is much easier to follow the flow, live according to external expectations, reproduce patterns. But the price of this is high. We lose sight of those who really are. The meaning of life is not in a distant place. He will not be revealed by a master or found in a holy book. The meaning of life is in your actions, in your choices, in your values. And he changes, and it can be redone. Because you change too. Perhaps, as Sartre himself said, man is nothing but what he does of himself. The greatest gift and the greatest curse of this human being, to be at the same time the author and character of our story. After all this, it is clear that perhaps the question, what is the meaning of life, don't have a single answer, and you may never have had. Sartre, Kierkegaard, Nietzsche, Frankl, each one has given us a different lens, but all deep down point to the same direction. The meaning is not discovered, it is built. There is no universal truth waiting to be unearthed. There is you, your choices, your values, your courage to live authentically, even knowing that there is no guarantees. And deep down, this is what gives meaning to life. The fact that it can be yours. The great provocation, then, is not discovering a star's written purpose, but asking every day, what am I doing with my freedom? Because no one will live this life for you. No one will find meaning in their place. And now I want to know about you. What makes your life worthwhile? Is there a fixed sense? Or are we the ones who create a way when walking? Leave your comment below. Let's continue this debate. If this video made you reflect, share it with someone who is also looking for something deeper. Enjoy, subscribe to the channel, activate the bell. Here, we don't deliver ready answers. We cause questions that can transform. After all, as Camus said, the fight towards the heights is sufficient to fill a man's heart, and maybe that's already enough.